Can you see them? Yeah. Okay. Can see them, eh?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hari Om Swami.
Hari Om.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the continuation of the discussion on the foundational texts of Indian philosophy. This meeting will be recorded and it will be posted on YouTube. So if you have missed any of the previous discussions, you may find it on YouTube. Also, there will be a question and answer segment at the end of the discussion session. If you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask. Please use the raise hand feature of Zoom in order to maintain the queue. If you are not speaking, please mute yourselves in order to minimize the disturbances. Thank you.
Recording in progress.
So, thank you, Prajwal. We will begin. Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupini avataravarishthaya Ramakrishnayati namaha. So, we are continuing, and maybe today we will conclude this part of the class, that is the giving a summary of the fundamental doctrines of RāMANUJA'S Viśiṣṭādvaita, qualified non-dualism, which again in comparison with Shankaracharya's non-dualism. So, just a few interesting points. The one, in Advaita system, the absolute reality, which is called Paramarthik Satta, is one, and that's the only reality. Everything else and all that appears to be manifold, not necessarily absolutely unreal, but only relative, not absolutely real, not absolutely unreal. So this is an important point. In contrast to this, RāMānuja says, Chit Achit Rupa Sarira Viśiṣṭātma. That means the absolute reality is, it is Advaitic, but conditioned by or modified by these two aspects. One is the effulgent and the non-effulgent. To put in simple language, RāMānuja's idea of the highest God or reality is one supreme person, but it is one, but within that one there is manifoldness. So these three fundamental principles called Tattwamayanandaji, three important principles. God, Ishvara on the one hand, and then different living beings in this world called Jivas, and then this entire phenomenal world, which is devoid of effulgence. So, Ishvara or God, the Supreme Person, RāMānuja calls that God as Atma or Brahman, and also as Vasudeva, Narayana, all these. So, remember, this may be slightly confusing to those who don't study the system from a person who does not belong to that particular particular group. So you have to remember, in Indian philosophical tradition, there is this parampara or succession of teachers, students and their students. There is one kind of learning where you don't go to university, you may have studied Sanskrit and all these related topics extremely well, but you study the philosophy as the doctrine as such. You study from a teacher who has studied from his teacher, and he has studied from his own teacher. So this is a kind of received heredity or heritage, a kind of transmission line. This may have this also did exist in European countries in the tradition of Dominican or Franciscan monastic orders, where they used to have only 1 or 2 books in the monasteries, and during the time of eating food, one man will read this one single copy and loudly, and others will listen. There will be discussions. So in a way, they may have studied from universities, but then this was considered to be the direct way of learning. Now, when you learn from a teacher, you find he also uses the word Brahman or Atma. And Shankaracharya also uses the word Brahman and Atma. So the same word implies 2 different things in 2 different philosophical systems. The true implication will be clear only to those who study from the system in the hereditary line of transmitting wisdom from teacher to student. So that's why if you study from a RāMāNUJā'S, you'll say Atma, Chit Achit Rupa Sarira Viśiṣṭam, that says. So, Chit Achit Rupa Sarira Viśiṣṭam Atma. This is what they would say. It means same Atma only. But that Atma is one supreme person with attributes, qualities. It can be defined. Again, there is a way of understanding that Atman. So as we are going, we will eventually understand. So Ramanuja or RāMāNUJā'S also use the word Atma, Brahman. And Advaitins also use the word Atma or Brahman. So that can be confusing. But Ramanuja's Brahman or Atman implies Ramanuja's highest concept of the supreme reality or God. So what is his highest concept of supreme reality of God? Atma or Brahman. But that Brahman is one supreme person. So people sometimes imagine that Brahman is some kind of a transcendental principle that you cannot see or feel anything. That kind of misunderstanding. To be very frank, no less than a person like Aurobindo himself made these terrible blunders, unforgettable blunders, because he studied, practically he was a highly anglicized, polished Indian. He can be more compared to maybe one of the elevated members of the House of Lords. He went to England, studied in the most elite British schools, was trained to be an officer in Indian civil service, and then he returned to India, and then of course he participated in some little bit of revolutionary work, not too much of it, and then he went to Pondicherry, which was under the French rule, and there he stayed. And so remember, that's a problem. So if you go to Aurobindo, he says Shankaracharya's Brahman is inactive like a stone. Such expression you find in Aurobindo, because he doesn't understand, maybe may not have studied the system. The word Brahman is used by all these philosophers. Only Shankaracharya's Brahman is, in Sanskrit, Nirguna Niragara Nirvisesha Brahman. Brahman is the absolute reality which is beyond names and forms and epistemological tools, which is an experiential inner spiritual truth. And according to Ramanuja, that Brahman is one supreme personal reality who has the attributes, who is the repository of all conceivable qualities, all knowledge, all wisdom, all auspiciousness, like that. So that's why he says, Chit Achit Rupa Sarira Viśiṣṭa Atma. That is Ramanuja's concept of supreme, absolute supreme reality. In contrast to this, Shankaracharya will say, his Shankaracharya's Atman is Atma Sarupam Ekameva Tattvam Na Anyat Kinchit. Atman is one supreme principle. There is nothing else. Again, according to Shankaracharya, Atma is only one reality. And of course, you may ask this question, what about the human beings? What about living beings? What about this world? So Shankaracharya will tell you that, well, there is no distinction. There is absolutely no distinction. Now, when you come to Ramanuja, he says there is a distinction. Now, I have to make some comments about this concept of distinction called Bheda, difference. I mean, difference between God and living beings, jivas, difference between God and the phenomenal world, difference between the phenomenal world and jivas, living beings, the difference within the realm of living beings, and difference between among the different entities in the phenomenal world. It's called 5 conceivable types of differences. These 5 differences are fully accepted as permanent by Madhvacharya, the diametrical opposite of Advaita system. So you have to remember, Dvaita is, the dualistic philosophy is almost the diametrical opposite of Advaita, the non-dualistic. Ramanuja system stands between these two. So Ramanuja system in a way combines some aspects of Advaita or non-dualism with some aspects of Dvaita or absolute dualism of Madhvacharya. So now this is with regard to difference. So it's called a Panchabheda Siddhanta in Madhvacharya system, which we are going to discuss after this, maybe after a few more sessions. So I have to say something about these differences. It's called a Bheda. These Bhedas are called Sajadiya Bheda, Vijadiya Bheda and Sogata Bheda. These are very, very important to understand the intricacies of the systems of Ramanuja, Madhva and Shankaracharya. The 3 schools, 3 distinct schools of Vedanta. There are many schools of Vedanta, 7 altogether, but these are 3 most clearly conceivable schools. Now, according to Advaita, Shankaracharya system, he denies all these 3 differences. What are the differences? One is called Sajadiya. I mean, differences within the same species. Let's say 2 human beings are not alike. This is a difference. This is Sajadiya, means. So Shankaracharya says there is no difference. So 2 human beings are different. That is how we describe Sajadiya Bheda, or what we may call external difference. Shankaracharya says, well, let's say the whole creation, the whole existence is essentially the word should be emphasized. Essentially, the entire existence is devoid of any difference. It's something like saying different pots and pans made of the same clay. There is no difference at all. But you may see a difference because you don't use a big pot for drinking water. You may use a small cup. You may use a smaller than the big vessel. You may use a jar for storing water. But you may use a cup made of clay for drinking water. So there is a difference. So Shankaracharya will say there is absolutely no difference, because you remove all the clay from the pots and pans, then nothing left. So what is it essentially? It is only clay. That's what he says. So Shankaracharya denies Sajadiya Bheda. That means difference between among the same species. And Shankaracharya also denies Vijadiya Bheda, difference between or among different species, like cow and human being. He says essentially the same Atman, same divine spark exists in all the living beings, whether cows or animals or elephants or human beings or insect or amoeba, everything. Remember, again, I can emphasize this point by quoting Vivekananda's famous statement. The difference between an amoeba and a Buddha is one of degrees, not of kind. So that's called Vijadiya Bheda, difference among different species, human beings, cows, etc. The third difference is Sugata Bheda. Same tree. It has its roots, it has branches, its trunk, it has fruits, leaves, and so on. So, that distinction is called Sugata Bheda, internal difference. Shankaracharya, Advaitins will deny all these three differences. So, Advaita tells you that everything in this world is one divine spark, divine spiritual truth. So, essentially, that's essentially that he says. People mistake. Shankara Advaita tells you that you and the tree and the mountains and the leaf and grass are the same. No, this is not what Advaita tells you. Advaita tells you that essentially behind everything in this world, whether the absolute reality of Brahman or different living beings or even the phenomenal world, there is one supreme reality. It doesn't say mountain is Brahman or a human being is a Brahman, cow is Brahman, not at all. These are all very, very laughable and very superficial interpretations which have created a lot of misunderstandings about Indian philosophy. So Shankaracharya, he totally rejects Sajadiya Bheda, Vijadiya Bheda and Sugata Bheda. Now coming to Ramanuja. Ramanuja rejects Sajadiya Bheda and Vijadiya Bheda. For example, Ramanuja will tell you that there is no difference between different human beings, among human beings. There is no difference between human beings and other living creatures, but he accepts Sugata Bheda. The reason is very simple. Ramanuja will tell you that only God or Ishvara has got this unique quality, has the uniqueness. What is the uniqueness? God is Sagala Kalyana Gunanidhi, is a repository of all auspicious characteristics. And this God is the one who possesses this body, and everything else constitutes the body. God is the whole, everything else constitutes different parts. God is a controller and everything is controlled. God is a protector and everything is protected. God is the one who is the whole, and of course everything else is parts. In other words, it is called in Sanskrit, the Sanskrit terms are important because when you read these books in even English translations, they use these terms called Sarira, Sariri, Sheshi, Shesha, Niyanta, Niyamya, Rakshaka, Rakshya, all these things. So Amsin and Amsa. Amsin is the one who possesses, Amsa means parts. Amsin is the one who possesses parts, the whole and parts. Rakshaka means the protector. Raksha means the one who is protected. Niyanta, the controller, the regulator. Niyamya means what is controlled and regulated. Sheshi, Shesha. And Sarira, Sariri means the one who has this body. Sharira is the body. In other words, God is the supreme reality present in everything and everywhere. So in that sense, there is no Sajadiya Bheda, no Vijadiya Bheda. There is no difference from within the same species, and there is no difference between two species. But there is a difference between different parts of the same. Why? Because God is present as Antaryami, indweller, everywhere, in everything. It is called Apratak Siddhi. But at the same time, Sriman Vishnu Narayana, that Ramanuja's concept of Saguna Sakara Savishesha, Ishvara, the supreme God person, supreme person, who is the repository of all qualities, all auspiciousness, all powers, all capacities. That is a special virtue or characteristic of God. In that sense, there is a difference called Sugata Bheda exists. This is a very, very important point, remember. So, as I mentioned earlier, Ramanuja stands between Shankara and Madhva. It is, that's why according to Vivekananda, in terms of spiritual evolution, we begin with Dvaita, dualism. We evolve through qualified non-dualism through Viśiṣṭādvaita. Eventually, we reach Advaita. So there are different perspectives. One is the perspective in terms of spiritual evolution of a spiritual seeker. The other one is philosophical. And if you go to India, if you go to different parts, different places in India, you find the person remains a Viśiṣṭādvaita in all his life, mostly, because that's the article of faith. So there is not much of a gradual evolution taking place, but that is a kind of, it becomes almost a cult. But from a spiritual perspective, every spiritual seeker begins with Dvaita, reaches Advaita eventually, but between the beginning and the final attainment, he goes through this intermediate level of Viśiṣṭādvaita. Another very important point. Shankaracharya says this supreme reality cannot be defined, cannot be explained, cannot be described. You may use all available tools of epistemology, Pratyaksha, Anumana, Vimana, Sabda, Arthabhatya, Anupalabdhi. These 6 pramanas are accepted by Vedantis in general. Direct perception, inference, analogy, then verbal testimony, then presumption and negation. These are 6 tools of epistemology, theory of knowledge. Among Vedantis in general, especially Advaitis. As Shankaracharya says, you cannot describe and explain or understand. You can only experience this spiritual reality. So, in other words, spiritual attainment in Advaita is essentially a part of our experience. Sutya, Yuktya, Swanubhutya. Swanubhutya means one's own inner experience. Immediate experience is called. It's Sakshat Aparoksha Brahma. The supreme reality is ourselves, but then it is not an idea, not a concept. When we attain that state, it is a matter of our own inner spiritual experience. So, in Vedantic literature, they use words like Avangmanasagocharam, Anirvachaniyam, Sarvapramanavadi, Avyapadesyam, Shantam, Shivam, Advaitam, etc. For example, Anirvachaniyam cannot be defined. Avangmanasagocharam, beyond mind and beyond words, beyond the sensory perception, and Sarvapramanavati, beyond the limitations, transcending the limitations of the tools of knowledge. I cannot be explained, thought of, or conceived of. It is something that we experience in the innermost heart of our being. But then Ramanuja says, no. You can certainly explain the supreme reality. Of course, when I explain Prapatti in my earlier sessions, I try to explain this from a different perspective. Prapatti in the true sense, Prapatti means self-surrender. Prapatti in the true sense is a matter of inner experience. But this may not be fully accepted by a traditional Viśiṣṭādvaita philosophers. But there is a received way of understanding, just like in Christian theology. I mean, you may be a Saint Teresa of Avila, you may be a Saint John of the Cross, but a priest may not accept whatever experience you're talking about. It is your inner experience. When you are a mystic, it is your inner experience. But a traditional ordained priest may not accept it. That is true in Hinduism also. So a typical follower of Ramanuja's system may not accept the idea that the surrender, the absolute surrender ideal, which is this very, very, very great, very well-known concept, so well articulated by Ramanuja in Sharanagati Gadyam and also in Sriranga Gadyam. So we may feel, after all, it's an inner experience, not just going to a place of worship and just confession, not at all. It is our own, at a point of time when we feel that we are totally helpless. We are knocking at all the doors, nothing opens. Then we surrender. So that is a kind of inner experience, closing the bargain in spiritual life. So this is prapatti. That means that is called when you reach a state of karpanyam. Then you practice atma nikshepa. I mean sharanagati. So anugulyesya sankalpaha pradigulyesya vardhanam rakshasya didi vishwasa goptrutva varanudha atma nikshepa karpanye shadvidha sharanagati. Without karpanyam, without getting this inner conviction, it's again matter of experience, not reading or intellectual conviction. Without getting this inner deep-rooted conviction that our efforts are not enough, our self-confidence is not enough, our own endeavor, our own qualities, our own strong determination, not enough. At that point, you surrender. So actually it's a matter of inner experience. As you can find those who read the Saint Teresa of Avila's inner castle, going deeper and deeper, which actually means going higher and higher in spiritual life. When you reach that point. But this may not be accepted by a traditional theology. I mentioned earlier, Ramanuja's system is more of a theology than a system of philosophy. It is more or less a system of theology. It runs parallel to many of the doctrines of Christian theology. So Ramanuja says God can be defined. God is Sarvajna, Nitya, Sarvavyapi and so on. Nirvishesha is Saviṣeṣa. Atma is Saviṣeṣa. A number of characteristics, qualities, attributes like omniscience. All God is all-knowing, is eternal, immortal, everlasting, present in everything, present everywhere. So all these definitions constitute the supreme reality. But in Shankaracharya's system, these definitions are only approximations. It's very important. So when you say in Advaita that there is God cannot be defined, one may ask this question, what about all these books then that we read and discuss? Full of words that we use. So Advaitins will tell you, these are important. These are very important from different perspectives. One perspective, when you feed your mind with all these great spiritual thoughts, all negative thoughts will be driven away. There's one view. Secondly, you invariably reach a point, that is, when you use all available tools of epistemology, and then you find that there is something beyond all that, sarva pramana avati. At that point, you reach, in your inner spiritual journey, you reach a point, and that is an experience, and that experience cannot be defined or described. Sri Ramakrishna, in very, very simple language, writing a book about milk, and then drinking milk and being nourished by milk. That are two different things. So, experience is beyond philosophy and epistemology. To give you an example, we are all familiar with the four Mahavakyas, and there are other important Vakyas in the Upanishad literature. Atmaite, Vubhasida, and so on. But there is also the four Mahavakyas, that is Tattwamasi, Upadesha Vakya, then Ayamatma Brahma, Prajnanam Brahma, which are different, which actually correspond to our spiritual journey. Anusandhana Vakya and Lakshana Vakyas, and then eventually we reach experience Aham Brahmasmi. I am Brahman, I am the supreme reality. So in Vedanta, Aham Brahmasmi, though it indicates a supreme spiritual experience, that word itself is not experience. It's an important thing. The word itself belongs to all Shastrams, all statements belong to Dvaita level. So you find in Mandukya Karika, Gaudapada Karika, all books, all discussions, all definitions, all descriptions, all hymns, all sacred books belong to Dvaita level. But these books may talk about Advaita and may contain great ideas like Mahavakyas, the great statements. But Advaitic experience transcends all these statements. So Sri Ramakrishna's statement, the word milk, one thing, the word what we drink and we get benefited by, that is the real milk, and be benefited by, that's the milk. Sugar, the word, and the sweetness of sugar. The weather forecast, a book that tells you about tomorrow's weather, and actually experiencing that weather, two different things. So Shankaracharya himself says, Aham Brahmasmi, even the Mahavakya itself is transcended when you reach the experience of the Mahavakya. In RāMāNUJA'S system, at least it is not so clearly articulated. But anyone can understand that surrender is essentially a matter, which is the highest experience in RāMāNUJA'S system. Surrender. When you reach surrender, it's a hotline. You close the bargain, you're every minute, every second you are living in the company of the Lord. Every word becomes sacred, every moment becomes sacred, every thought becomes meditation. Whole life is actually a spiritual pilgrimage. That's the highest state. Anyone can understand that this is really a matter of experience. But in the RāMāNUJA system, it is not so much emphasized. That's why in the RāMāNUJA system you have to go to a teacher, you have to explain, you have to this bharanyasa, giving your responsibility, the responsibility of a protection to your teacher. You have to make a statement, sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja aham tva sarvabhabebhyo mokshayishyami ma suja. The 66th verse of the 18th chapter, which actually says, it's again actually is a matter of experience, but it is really a matter of experience. It is not clearly emphasized. It is not an article of faith in the RāMāNUJA system. In Shankaracharya system, it's an article of faith. That this uniqueness of Advaita drew many great spiritual teachers from different traditions. You can find that from 18th century onwards. You can find it. So this is one thing. Second important point, remember, is, this I already mentioned earlier, that, in Shankaracharya system, sometimes you find statements that you cannot even define God as the repository of all auspiciousness. That is sometimes mentioned in Shankaracharya system. Na tatra kalyana karaka api guna vastudaha santi. Na tatra santi means So, Adeva Jasa Nirgunaha. So, the Shankaracharya system essentially is Nirguna. Even Kalyana Karaka api guna vastudana santi. Even auspicious qualities do not exist. What it means is, the supreme reality, it's beyond definition, even in terms of being a repository of all that is auspicious. Because the moment you define God as the totality of all that is auspicious, then you have to find the way to describe the opposite of that. What about the negative? What about the problem of error and the problem of evil? Problem of evil in Abrahamic traditions, problem of error in Advaita tradition. So Advaita accepts the problem of error. The inauspicious, the negative is explained in terms of the problem of error. But in Abrahamic traditions, it is explained as a manifestation of the rival of God, a kind of rival, somebody who is acting as a rival to God, the Antichrist, or you may call it the Satan or Beelzebub or anyone like that. So that's why in Shankaracharya system, the supreme reality cannot be defined even in terms of all that is auspicious, because that leaves up the scope for creating another rival concept. If God is the totality of all that is good, how do you explain the reality of many things which are not so good that you experience in this world? Then you have to invent a devil for that. So, and if you invent a devil, then it is no more non-dualism, it becomes dualism. So, in Shankaracharya system, this is na tatra kalyana karaka api gunaha vastudhana santi. But in contrast to this, Ramanuja says, Atma subhavata eva apagata patmatvat adi aneka kalyana gunakaraka gunasayaka na tatra he gunaha santi. That is Ramanuja system. So Ramanuja tells you on the other hand that in his philosophy, God can be explained as a totality of all that is auspicious. There is nothing that is heya, that is means something that will be given up, that should be dispensed with. Everything is auspicious. So there is not a clear-cut answer. But when you ask the question, what about the other side of the coin? Maybe Viśiṣṭādvaitins have no answer. So that is I don't call it because that the subject didn't come up during the system. And remember, unfortunately what happened, unlike Dvaita system, Ramanuja system did not grow beyond a limit. Maybe because of its strong theological foundation. It was a supreme devotional movement. And on the other hand, Advaitins, and to a lesser extent Dvaitins, gave birth, produced a number of outstanding dialecticians. But in Ramanuja system, after Vedanta Desika, there was nobody who could be compared with Vedanta Desika. He was the one who put Ramanuja system in a solid philosophical foundation. So that's an important. Another point is in Shankaracharya system, by its very nature, Brahman is jnanam, knowledge itself. Knowledge is not an attribute, but in Ramanuja system, knowledge or jnanam, awareness, so to speak, is an attribute of God. Because if you want to retain the personal aspect of Ramanuja's Brahman, then you have to emphasize that God is not jnanam, God is not knowledge, rather knowledge is only an attribute, is a quality, is a property of God. But in Shankaracharya system, knowledge is Brahman itself. This second, again, in Shankara system, knowledge is Brahman itself. So, but at the same time, you cannot say that Brahman knows something. That's a very important point. It's technically very difficult, especially those who are not familiar with the traditional arguments in Sanskrit. It makes it very simple. Brahman is not jnata. Means Brahman is not the one who knows. Brahman is not involved in the act of knowing something. And Brahman is not karta. Brahman is not involved in the act of doing something. Brahman is not jnaya. Brahman is not the object of knowledge. So neither jnata nor jnaya. Brahman is not the knower nor the known. Not the knower nor the known in Shankaracharya's Advaita system. But in RāMāNUJā system, the God can be defined, described as the Jnata, Vijnata, and that God is our supreme object of spiritual knowledge. So, Jnaya, supreme Jnata, Jnaya and Vijnata. In Advaita system also you find this word is used, but there it's not equal, it is not involved in any, there is no indication that Brahman is knowing something or Brahman is becoming involved in any kind of activity like doing or knowing or anything. On the other hand, RāMāNUJā says Brahman is both Jnaya and also Jnata. Another important point is Shankaracharya admits that this is a technical point. Shankaracharya says that Atman is Nitya and Kutastha, mean eternal, and also involved, immanent in everything, doesn't become anything in this world, but only appears to have become. So I shall, the exact Sanskrit statement can be referred to here to make that, because Sanskrit statements make it more simple. So RāMāNUJā says Paramatma Svena Rupena Kudastha Nityaha Chit Ajit Rupena Sarira Viśiṣṭa Rupena Tu Parinama Nityaha. Parinama Nityaha Viśiṣṭa Rupena Iva Dvitiyaha. So RāMāNUJā believes in Parinama. This Parinama should be understood. It has something to do with the doctrine of a cause and effect. So this I explained in a different context. Gold becomes different ornaments which are made of gold. Necklace, rings and so on. Or clay becomes different different pots and pans and cups made of clay. Now RāMāNUJā will tell you that this clay has become, the B, capital is important, become, has actually become pots and pans. Gold has actually become necklace, it has become a ring. Parinama means real transformation. Like oil seeds becoming oil through parinama, real transformation. But suppose you say the threads have become cloth, or gold has become golden ornaments, you are not 100% justified. Because if you melt these golden ornaments and different ornaments, they go back to gold. If they have really become, you use the word capital letter B, parinama, then golden ornaments cannot go back to gold form. So Shankaracharya will tell you, it appears to have become different ornaments. Or clay appears to have become different pots and pans. Why? It doesn't really become. You can imagine, if you break all this, they go back to clay form. So RāMāNUJA'S system is compared, Parinama is compared to oil seeds becoming oil. Oil cannot go back to oil seed. Oil is as real as oil seed. Oil seed doesn't exist. It has become oil now. But you have got a golden ornament. There, the gold is, the golden ornament has not left the gold behind. The oil has left the oil seed behind. Oil cannot go back to oil seed, but golden ornaments can go back to gold form. Pots and pans can go back to clay. So when it can go back to its previous form, the causal form, it is called apparent transformation. This apparent transformation is called vivarta in Shankaracharya system, vivarta. But real transformation is called parinama. The oil seed becoming oil is parinama. Gold becoming golden ornaments is vivarta, where you can go back to gold. But then there are many statements in later Advaitic works. Sankshepa Sharirakam by Sarvajñātma Muni, the famous scholar, saint. He says, Vivartavadasya Purvabhumi Vedantavade Parinamavadaha Vyavastidesmin Parinamavade Swayam Samayadi Vivartavadaha. That's a very, very interesting statement. It's an absolute fact. I will explain this. Now, how do you understand Vivarta Parinama in our spiritual life? Well, we can say, when you travel from Dvaita through Viśiṣṭādvaita towards Advaita, what happens, First you think God is a very wonderful man, all auspicious qualities. He listens to your prayers, very compassionate, wonderful, fine. And you go and you pray and your prayers are fulfilled. That's wonderful. So you think, well, that's true. And then when you go further, you say God has become everything. That's a common statement. This is a statement that God has created everything, and beyond that God has become everything. Actually, God has created everything is Dvaita only. God has become everything is only Viśiṣṭādvaita. This, in a way, Viśiṣṭādvaita system can develop only in a very refined society. So Dvaita may represent a view from a maybe from a less refined spiritual background, but nothing is wrong, everything is correct. Only one is less complete picture to a more complete picture, this progress. So Advaita can be understood only in a very, very refined, in an exalted spiritual culture. Spiritual culture, I'm not talking about philosophical doctrine. So one may imagine, well, God has become everything. And as you move further, you understand, well, one can easily start his spiritual life and become God himself. How? You start manifesting godly qualities. You don't become God in the Viśiṣṭādvaitic sense, but in the Advaitic sense, when you transcend the idea of body-mind complex, and when you reach a point of absolute spiritual knowledge, you may become a Jivan Mukta, completely liberated. The life itself becomes divine. In that sense, every day, every moment, you may be experiencing the spiritual unity and oneness of the entire thing. So that's again a state that comes, but before you reach that state, You may think, well, God is one and He has become all this. That's why Vivartavadasya Purvabhumi Vedantavade Parinamavadika. Parinamavada, or the concept of real transformation, is a necessary, unavoidable, intermediate state that comes to a person in his journey in spiritual space from Dvaita through Viśiṣṭādvaita towards Advaita. Vyavasthitesmin parinamavade swayam samayadi vivartavadeha. And later, when you progress in spiritual life, how God has become everything. When you meditate, you go deeper and deeper in your spiritual journey, then you see nothing but God everywhere. And that God is not a big, muscular person with a big stick in his hand. That God expresses His presence as peace, serenity, tranquility, the same divine spark pervading everywhere. So it's a matter of internal experience. That's why Sankshipta Shariraka says, Samrakyatma Muni says, Vivartavadasya Purvabhumi Vedantavade Parinamavadaha Vyavasthitesmin Parinamavade Swayam Samayati Vivartavadaha. So the idea that everything is only appears to have become all this, the same Brahman is everywhere, it automatically comes to a person who transcends the early stage of his experience. That's the idea behind. That's again, one may ask the question, you cannot explain this, then why do you take all the trouble? I tell you, when we can think of spirituality, even at least intellectually as a doctrine, when we can think that the highest spiritual experience is the inner experience of the supreme spiritual unity of everything. As a doctrine, it can help humanity in a big way, especially in current time. This is an important thing. Not that you are going to become Brahman tomorrow, or there is any scope for you to become a Brahman in this life or next life. It may not happen, but this is the highest reach of spirituality, and not just acting or working on behalf of a God. That's not spirituality. Seeing God's presence everywhere as the one reality, that is the highest spiritual possibility. That conviction can help humanity to remain in a state of, sensibility and moderation. That's an important value of spiritual Advaita. That's why Vivekananda considered Advaita as the most solid foundation of universal ethics and morality. Because even when we intellectually understand this, it can help humanity and human culture. Because intellectual understanding of many nasty ideas create lots of problems. So intellectual understanding of some great exalted ideas will certainly have a healing effect on humanity. So that's why Advaita is so very important in today's world. It speaks of some higher possibilities in human spiritual life, in our spiritual life. So this is a very important thing to remember. Now the next subject is interesting. With that we'll conclude. What about this Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya Jiva Brahma Ivanaparaka, this idea? I explained this on many occasions earlier. So the point is, this is a statement that we have to contemplate and think and pursue. Here, Sravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. We must listen, read, be intellectually convinced, and think of this. There is one supreme reality, everything else is only relative, means non-eternal, not absolutely real, nor absolutely unreal. That is mithya. Now, this idea was never properly understood by non-Advaitic philosophers. That is based on, I only explained this on the basis of Sapta Anuvapattivada, which is actually taken from RāMāNUJA'S Sribhāshyam, where Mahapurva, Purvapaksha, Mahasiddhanta. So you find discussions on the I mean the what do you call the illogical aspect of the concept of mithyatva, the untenable. It is totally untenable. So, anubhavatta, anubhavati, sapta anubhavativada. 7 reasons why mithya, the idea of mithya is not acceptable. RāMANUJA'S philosophy, Sribhashya explains all this, and elsewhere, of course. So the point is, by mithya, Shankaracharya never meant something that never exists. It's only linked to the idea, the human nature. But frequently, when we experience things, when we see things, when we hear things, we frequently forget the fact that they do not remain the same for all times. Instead, we think they exist the same way for all time, this misunderstanding. So in such a background, you have to mention, tell the person who makes a mistake, that, well, all these things will come and go. They don't exist without a change, the past, present and future. They are subjected to sadvikaras. Jayade, asti, vardhade, vivarinamade, abhakshede, vinashyati. That's coming to existence, existing, evolving, growing, evolving, decaying and dying and disappearing and re-emerging. So everything in this world belongs to that. So a person who wrongly imagines that a mud pot is fundamentally different from a cup made of mud or clay, that person should be told, that's wrong. They are saying clay. So like that, Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya. Everything else is only a Parinami Satta or Parinami Satya, means something that goes on changing all the time. Things that are getting transformed every day, every minute. That's the nature of this world, the fundamental impermanence, the transient nature of the phenomenal world and everything. That is the real implication of the word mithya. But the mithya, maya and avidya, these 3 terms were very often misunderstood and a lot of opposition you find in non-Advaitic literature. We will discuss another aspect of this sublime philosophy of Ramanuja, especially in devotional philosophy. We already discussed the prapatti aspect. Some other important aspect we will discuss in the next session onwards. Then we can have interaction. You are most welcome. Yes.
Thank you so much, Maharaj.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sri Ram, you are first.
Yeah.
In Advaita, fundamental principle is Jnaneneva eva kaivalyam. That is, knowledge is everything. And all the karmas and kriyas are only will result in chitta shuddhi.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that, of course, the reality is beyond anirvachaniya, mana, gochara, etc., etc. You mentioned that the guru aspect is necessary only Viśiṣṭādvaita, but I thought even in Advaita you need a qualified guru to study the scripture. Atma Vichara has to be done under the guidance of a guru who has come from a Guru Shishya Parampara. Can you comment on that, please?
Yeah. So now, of course, you made a number of observations. The last observation was with regard to Guru. But before that, you made some observations. Remember, the Chitta Suddhi Karma, etc. All these belong to the early stage of any spiritual seeker. One should focus on doing the right thing, and then one should focus on doing the right thing without any attachment. Gradual evolution is there. And then only you actually fully understand the true meaning of scriptures. Now you talked about Guru, that's true. Now, are you speaking about Guru in the spiritual tradition in that sense, or Guru, the teacher, the one who teaches the scriptures?
In the Vivek Chudamani, there's talking Mahapurusha Samsaya.
Oh, yeah. Manishuttam Mukshuttam Mahapurusha Samsaya. So that's true. So the point is, without getting association with somebody who somehow represents the great teachings, you may not be fully convinced of what you are learning. That's a fundamental fact in everything. So now, there are two aspects in which this Mahapurusha Samsaya, association with the great teachers, it functions. One, as I mentioned earlier, when you meet somebody who is completely convinced of what he's teaching and he focuses on that with great consistency, you naturally, and also he doesn't claim that this is his truth, he invented this somewhere and no one can understand. He says that this is coming from the parampara, the succession of great teachers. Then it has got a great value. This is a very important thing. You can easily see, suppose you read an article in some vlogger, all kinds of things will appear in internet. There no, in fact, internet is overcrowded with these omniscient writers and speakers and philosophers, Practically they can write on everything. So that's a big problem. Anyway, so the point is, suppose you read some superficial something. And then after you read something else which is equally superficial but running contrary to that. But this may go on. That is one way of learning. Suppose you have in your place or anywhere you have a great teacher who studied from his teacher. That teacher doesn't claim that his invention. He claims that he was taught by another great teacher. You rely upon him. Why the internet? They are all self-taught. So that's why very often there are many pits and many traps there. But if somebody tells you, well, I've studied this book from a great teacher and this is what I studied, and he sincerely believes and teaches, you may or may not accept him completely, but you can depend upon him because he's speaking what he thinks is absolutely real and he has learned from another teacher. He belongs to this succession, this link of great teachers, preceptors coming from ancient times. That's one kind of preceptorship, guruship, guru, teacher. The other one is a teacher who transmits to you a kind of spiritual possibility, spiritual potency. It's like a candle is lit in your heart. It may not keep burning all your life in this cycle, but it will remain with you, and you're born again, you'll be born with these tendencies. There's a higher spiritual concept of spiritual preceptor. It's not intellectual concept. We are not talking about teachers who teach great ideas. We are talking about teachers who transmit into you. Because they have that lamp burning in their heart and they are transmitting that into you. And when you want to lit a candle, the wick of the candle should come in close proximity with another burning lamp. There is 1 millimeter gap. The light will not be transmitted from one lamp into another lamp. It doesn't happen. So that is called transmission of Guru Parampara in the more traditional sense. That is spiritual. This is the later one. The former type of teachers are great teachers who preserve this tradition as a sacred obligation to the ancient preceptors. That's what if you know. So there are two different ways. So when Shankaracharya mentions in Vivékachudamani, Dullabam Tayamevedat Daivanugraha Hetukam Manishuttam Mumukshuttam Mahapurusha Samseha. So these three unique blessings in human existence, Dullabha means so difficult to get. Daivanugraha Hetukam, it's only by the grace of God you get this. That is Manishuttam, being born as a human being, Mumukshuttam, and born as a human being with a great urge for spiritual enlightenment. And then you get an opportunity to connect with somebody from whom you may learn something about the spiritual journey that you want to undertake. Or if you are still more blessed, Vivekananda got Sri Ramakrishna as a guru. So Sri Ramakrishna just lit the lamp in his heart. It took some time for it to manifest. You find even after the first experience of Advaita, Swami Vivekananda was not fully convinced. He had to go through many years of struggle. But the lamp was there. It was burning, but it began to burn in full effulgence later. So there are two different ways of interpreting Guru concept. Mahapurusha Samseka. And another important thing I will tell you, when you listen to the great statements, why we are referring to the great original statements of these great sages, where Shankaracharya, RāMāNUJā, Madhva, Vallabha, Nimbarka, anyone for that matter, the words they wrote and uttered and they taught, they do have potency. And they mean something much more than what their English or any translation could mean, or any Indian vernacular translation. No vernacular, Indian vernacular can fully represent the great teachings originally mentioned in the great Sanskrit statements, or in Indian language, or in English. None of these languages. So the words do have a potency. So when you listen to a teacher uttering those words, which were written or uttered by great sages, in the case of RāMāNUJā, in 12th century AD, they do have a potency. You can say prapatti. RāMāNUJā used the word. You can mention any other word, but the particular word has its potency. So word does have a meaning and significance that goes far beyond what it means in dictionary. That's why Mahapurusha Samsaya can be interpreted as the ability to learn from a traditional teacher, or to be blessed by a great teacher who can lit the lamp in your heart. Sri Ramakrishna Vivekananda is supreme example of this. Okay, thank you.
Guruji.
Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
Your turn, C. Gopinath.
Yeah. Please.
Namaste, Swamiji.
Namaste.
You used an expression, the problem of error, in today's discussion in Advaita.
Yeah.
Can you explain that a little more? What is the problem of error?
Yeah, I'll tell you. So that's very. So, in Abrahamic theology, mostly in Christian theology and also in Islamic theology, they use the word, they have somebody who is a rival to their God. So any problem that you experience in this world can be explained in terms of intervention on the part of the devil, as they call it, the Satan, or the archangel, and so on, you find. And this more or less can be found in other Abrahamic traditions, especially in the Islamic tradition. Now, even in Buddhism, Mara there is a Buddha. Buddha doesn't talk about it, but later Buddhists, they invented or they slowly developed this something like an archangel thing. Now, that is true in RāMāNUJā, Madhva, and other systems, all these dualistic systems. Somebody is somewhere who is moving trying to move in the opposite direction. So that's the idea. Now, in Advaita, they don't accept this. It's called the problem of evil. What I mentioned till now. In Advaita, they don't accept the problem of evil. They consider this problem of error. Ignorance or spiritual ignorance of avidya, absence of our true understanding of our true nature, absence of our understanding of our own true nature, that we are the Atman, we are the all-pervading reality. This is not well understood nor realized. Here, absence of understanding doesn't mean intellectual. Somebody who is not spiritually enlightened. So the absence of spiritual enlightenment is an error. So that's the reason why people do wrong things. That's how Advaitins interpret it. It's not that somebody is standing there to drive you in his direction. Actually, John Milton's devil, Satan, is almost a close competitor to God. He is not almost as strong, literally 1 inch below, that's all. He's not a small fry, the devil, Beelzebub. in Milton's Paradise Lost. So, I tell you, we cannot dismiss this. This is the only way for a common person to understand some imponderable, some very difficult, incomprehensible problems we face in life. So the natural tendency, we want to find somebody, want to invent somebody who is pulling the strings in the opposite direction. So naturally, it must be somebody else is working against God. We call him devil or whatever it is. But when you reach a higher level of spiritual evolution, then you find it is a person does terrible things, not prompted by the devil, but because he is not aware of his own true nature. He has the divine spark within him, but he is not aware of that. So he interprets himself to be this body-mind complex, greedy, violent, evil, selfish, and so on, exploiting, and so on. So once he gets this spiritual knowledge, of course he may not get it immediately. He has to travel through this transmigratory cycle for many hundreds of years. But once he realizes, he will get out of this. This is how Advaitins interpret it. It's clear to you?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm going to lower my hand, and I think Sri Ram is next.
Yeah.
Followed by David.
Well, David, Sri Ram, you already did one question. Let's go to David. Yeah.
Okay, all right. David it is.
Yeah.
There you are.
Yeah.
What is the case? I know you didn't mention it, but except when you said that Swami Vivekananda had the experience early on of Advaita.
Yeah.
What is the place of that Nirvikalpa Samadhi is that like necessary? Is that, is that what is the place of Nirvikalpa Samadhi in Advaita? Is that a necessary, or is that just some people experience it who realize that?
Yeah. Nirvikalpa Samadhi, Sri Ramakrishna did not recommend Nirvikalpa Samadhi or Advaita to all his monastic disciples, only to Vivekananda. So Swami Vivekananda he was a young man, young student, he was a bit of kind of an agnostic. So he did not understand the true implications of Sri Ramakrishna's description of Advaita, Brahman. So sometimes Swamiji in a laughable manner made light of everything. Then Sri Ramakrishna just transmitted that knowledge into him, touched him in the forehead or something. So it's a great spiritual teachers can do that, especially the tantric tradition. Those who have mastered the tantric tradition, they do that. So immediately Swami Vivekananda had this unique experience, everything disappearing, everything in his room, all becoming an energy and disappearing. Finally one light energy spreading everywhere. So he had this kind of transcendental experience. But remember, Swamiji was not ready for that at that time. Or Sri Ramakrishna did not think Swami Vivekananda was ready at that time. So as Sri Ramakrishna says, I will keep this within a box and I will open only later. And so Sri Ramakrishna says that. And this Swami Vivekananda had the same experience on the last day of his passing away. And at that time, when he suddenly remembered, he went straight into the prayer room, he meditated for some hours, came out, went to his own room, asked his attendant to wait outside, and he sat in meditation, finally laid down, and breath is last. So from this we have to assume that Vivekananda suddenly remembered the experience that he had. Actually, he wanted to remain in that state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi instead of going about preaching Vedanta. Vivekananda had no notion of what he was going to do later on. It was actually a total surprise to himself, really speaking. Many people don't really understand this. Even Swami Vivekananda himself had no notion that he was going to become a great champion of Vedanta, especially when he was talking to Sri Ramakrishna in the Dikshanagar in Sri Ramakrishna's room. I can give you an example. P.C. Majumdar was a prominent Brahma Samaj leader who also attended the Parliament of World Religion in 1893. P.C. Majumdar became very jealous of Vivekananda. But there is another background. Same P.C. Majumdar used to attend Brahma Samaj meetings. They used to sing hymns, Vedic mantras, and they used to preach more like a Unitarian church. That's how they function more or less in Calcutta, the Brahma Samaj institutions. More like Unitarian church. If you go there, you can see the same seating arrangement, all that. So, P.C. Majumdar used to take part in those meetings, Vijay Krishna Goswami and others. And once somebody asked P.C. Majumdar about Vivekananda, do you know this Naren, that's how the short name, Vivekananda's old name is Narendra. Oh yeah, I've seen him, that's all. P.C. Majumdar, he didn't seem to pay much attention. The same P.C. Majumdar was in Chicago in 1893, remember. Maybe 5-6 years later. And he found this youngster who was singing some bhajans in an unknown person. Long ago, 5-6 years ago, he had found him singing some bhajans in a small tiny group in Calcutta. This youngster is now making waves in this foreign country. And P.C. Majumdar was an experienced orator. And he used to invite all world to come to India and convert Indians. Indians are waiting for Jesus Christ, ready to be converted. That's how he concluded his great Chicago address. You can read in Dr. Barrow's the proceedings of the first Parliament of Religion in 1893. So you can imagine. So Vivekananda himself was a straightforward, outspoken, but very humble, actually very humble, very sincere student and a seeker. That is what he was. So he had his own doubts. He was not willing to accept anyone if anyone taught him something. So he questioned Sri Ramakrishna. When Sri Ramakrishna started talking about Advaita, then Sri Ramakrishna transmitted a little spark into him. But immediately Vivekananda got frightened. He started saying, what are you doing to me? I have my parents, I have my father, my brother, my family. What are you doing to me? Because Swamiji could not digest at that time the supreme spiritual experience. So Sri Ramakrishna was trying to give him a peep, a glance into that supreme experience. But after that, Vivekananda again, he went back to his college, he studied, and eventually, his whole story. But then, towards the end of his life in 1902, in July, on the last day of his passing away, he remembered. He came back to him. Sri Ramakrishna already predicted, it will be kept with me. I will get back to you when your work is over. So when you are in the state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, you don't do anything. You cannot think of doing anything for anyone or anything. So Gaudapada Karika says, Shastram, Shasta, Shishya. Shastra means the spiritual knowledge. Shastra means the teacher. And Shishya means the student. They exist only in Dvaita level. Nirvikalpa Samadhi is at Dvaita level. At that time there is no preaching, there is no Parliament of religion, there is no practical Vedanta, there is no elocution, there is no great speeches. So, Swami Vivekananda did all this great work between these 2 points of time. The time when Sri Ramakrishna transmitted gave him a glimpse of that supreme experience. And finally the time when it came back to him, he remembered and he decided to leave this physical body. Between these 2 intervals, all the great work was done. So we are sitting here rather, discussing Vedanta. Because of that. Because of the great work Vivekananda did between these 2 points of time in his life. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Maharaj. Sri Ram, I don't envy you following that,
Thank
that
you.
beautiful description, but go ahead, please.
Yeah.
Well, in the Advaitic experience, the ultimate reality involves transcendence. It is beyond words, it is beyond logic, it is beyond Tripuri, etc. Does the Viśiṣṭādvaitic goal not involve any transcendence?
Yeah, the prapatti, the self-surrender in its highest sense is a kind of transcendence. Because what is prapatti? Prapatti happens only when you feel you are a kripana, karpanyam. You feel you are totally helpless, you are a destitute. At that time, you are helpless, you surrender yourself. So it is a straight-cut ascendance. So there is transcendence, but not transcendence to the level of nirvisesha, nirguna, nirakara, that impersonal level. No. Yeah, thank you for the question. David's question was very profound. I am very grateful for those questions, Yeah, David's question was very, very helpful. Yeah.
Very much. Maharaj, we have a few minutes left. If you'll entertain one more question from me.
Yeah, most welcome. Yeah.
You gave a very rational description for the function of the devil in the Miltonian universe and also in conventional or Western spiritual life.
Yeah.
That I never thought of it that way because I was not raised in a tradition that exposed me to this concept until I read John Milton as a student.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling that there was this, compelling case for the role of the devil, which I didn't understand the function. And you just explained that it's necessary to explain the conditions of the temporary conditions of human life, the adversities and the obstacles and struggles. But my question is this, and it was my question then, and the professor was kind to me, but I still have the question: why give the devil a promotion? Because when the devil is given such a promotion as the functionary for all of these things, then there's a tendency of it's human nature then to have that support for the blaming, support for the finger pointing, and for a certain kind of negativity, which then becomes a bit fearful, a bit obsessed with problems rather than transcendence. So why give the devil a promotion is my question.
Yeah. So, to coming back to Milton's Paradise Lost, of course it's based on, loosely based on the biblical mythology. So the point is, why should you give a promotion to the devil? I mean, actually, the devil concept is a natural effect of our need, our urge to find an explanation for things that we don't want to do, we don't want to see, we don't want to experience, but we are doing, we feel as we are compelled to do things, we are forced to see things and experience things that we don't really like, which naturally should be against the positive, we should against the divine and godly. So I can refer you, I think this Dr. Robin Williams' book on Dostoevsky's, where he talks about the natural urge for Dostoevsky's own interpretation of the natural human urge for the evil, for doing the wrong thing. That's what we find, especially when he analyzes the characteristics of the two elder brothers of brothers Karamazov. One is Ivan and Dmitri, in total contrast to the almost godly character of Alexei, the youngest one. So the point is, there's a natural urge in every human being at some point to move in the opposite direction. There is a tendency. This is something called the natural urge for the evil. So this may have made a need for finding an explanation in anthropomorphic terms. Not an idealistic explanation, but an anthropomorphic explanation. Some kind of a, you can see the horns and the pictures, the cartoons of the devils in the old biblical literature, old editions of the Bible you can see. So the point is, I think, this is a result of the natural human urge for the evil and the natural urge for find a description for this evil, to find a logical explanation for this unpleasant experience. So, and the normal human being who may not be aware of this higher possibility of Advaita, who can only think in terms of God creating this world and being an arbiter of all his creation, supervising his creation, in such a ecosystem, what you call theological ecosystem, you will naturally come up with some kind of an anthropomorphic evil person. That's the God, the devil is a result. But in Advaita, you are convinced that the reality is one. So even an archangel who may be opposite to God will disturb the Advaitic system. Advaita will become Dvaita if you accept an anthropomorphic explanation for the evil. So you should go for a non-anthropomorphic explanation of the evil. Means not giving a human form, not giving a visible form. Rather, it is just a state of human mind when you identify yourself with this body-mind complex. When you go beyond all this, when you understand there is one divine reality, that's the only reality, then the person cannot do anything wrong even unconsciously. Even unconsciously, you cannot do anything evil. Because in non-Advaitic systems, there's a conscious effort needed to keep away from evil. In any theological system or non-Advaitic theological system, like RāMāNUJA system, you have to be you have to be alert about this tendency to do the wrong thing. But in Advaita, even it is impossible for you to do anything wrong, because you just not believe in, you see the entire creation as one spiritual family, it's non-different from yourself. So how can you think of doing any harm to yourself? By hurting your neighbor, you're hurting yourself. So there is no need to emphasize you should love your neighbor. But loving your neighbor becomes a natural habit because you cannot hate your neighbor in Advaita. But in non-Advaita system, you have to keep the person, you should love your neighbor as yourself. You should not hate. But in Advaita, you don't have to say, don't hate, because he will naturally love his neighbor. Because his neighbor and himself are the same. Your neighbor and yourself are the same. Again, there the foundation for these statements comes from Shankaracharya's commentary on one of the Mandukya verses. Susiddhanta vyavasthasu dvaitino nischida dridham parasparam viruddhyante taihi ayam na viruddhyate. So you find the word Dvaita is used in this verse. This Dvaita has nothing to do with Madhvacharya's Dvaita system, because Shankaracharya, Gaudapadacharya lived in 6th century AD and Madhvacharya in 12th century AD, 600 years later. And Shankaracharya wrote a commentary 100 years after Gaudapada. And Shankaracharya says, Asmadiyoyam Vaidiko Dharmana Viruddhade Atma Ananyatvad. Because your neighbor and you are the same. So, you don't have to be reminded you should love yourself. You should not hate yourself. You should not hit your head with your own right hand. You don't hit your own head with your right hand. You hit only another man's head with your right hand. You don't hit yourself. Because you and the other are the same. Your neighbor are the same. So this total identity and oneness and spiritual unity and oneness of whole creation, this central theme of Advaita. So there is a totally non-anthropomorphic ecosystem, theological ecosystem, where you don't have to search for a personalized evil, because the evil is our own wrong tendencies, our own impurities in our own mind. When that is cleaned, then your true nature comes out. Then there is no neighbor, you yourself are your own neighbor. That's the idea behind.
Thank you, Maharaj. It's interesting, these philosophical ideas resonate from thousands of years across the eons, eras, different philosophical systems all in conversation with each other. But your point about it having the potential, by its very essence, reducing unnecessary conflicts in the world.
True, actually, yeah, that's true. That's why Advaita is a great ethical, moral philosophy, but it's not understood in that way. So there should be more conversations at academic and non-academic levels, and unfortunately, it doesn't happen. In modern times, we should pay more attention to these great ideas, because human civilization should be preserved. Science and technology alone cannot do that. So this idea of unity and oneness.
We also should probably be aware that if we, as C. Gopinath said, elevate somebody into a devil to be vanquished, that we may be their devil to be vanquished next.
Yeah. True. So the problem is within our own heart, that is Chitta Shuddhi, what Sri Ram mentioned, purity of mind. So the impurity is called this devil. The impurity in our own mind is given a personalized anthropomorphic interpretation, you call it devil, that's all. But I tell you cannot blame anyone, because this is a natural urge for somebody who has just begun spiritual journey. He wants to see the man who is responsible for all, say a good man, a virtuous man, he's suffering. And an evil man is succeeding in everything. So people are naturally they are at a loss to understand, to find an explanation for this. So at that time, the early theologians, Milton's Paradise Lost it is just a literary classic. But the point is, so the natural seeker will try to find an explanation in more concrete terms, not in subtle or mystical terms, but something very concrete. So he creates a big monstrous fellow with horns and who is creating trouble everywhere in the world. And the result is this Beelzebub, devil, all this Satan and all this.
Well, thank you, Maharaj. Rowan Williams, who you cited, was Archbishop of Canterbury formerly. So his point of view is interesting because he was from this Church of England.
Yeah, he is a great student of Dostoevsky, whom he considers perhaps the greatest novelist of all time. So his writings on the mostly, of course, he deals with all others, but in his study of Dostoevsky mostly focuses on Brothers of Karamazov and Crime and Punishment, others. But it's very profound. Dostoevsky himself was a great philosopher and thinker in that sense, So, okay. So thank you so much. Thank you for the questions, Bobby, David, everyone, Sriram, all, and Gopinath. Very useful, very, 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 very helpful questions. Thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Pranamastu.
Pranam.
Namaskar.
Recording stopped.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Namaskar.